Dear students, welcome back. In the previous session, we have discussed about the landmarks of the abdomen. Now, in this session, we are going to see the anterior abdominal wall. In this session, we are going to see the layers of the anterior abdominal wall and also its extension, and also skin, about the skin, and also the superficial fascia in this session, and the remaining layers we are going to see in the next session. Now we will see the extension of the anterior abdominal wall. This anterior abdominal wall extends superiorly from the xiphoid process and also the costal margins to the pubic bones as well as the iliac bones. So inferiorly it extends up to the pubic and iliac bones. On either side it is extended up to the mid-axillary line. It extends up to the mid-axillary line. So this is the extension of the anterior abdominal wall. Now we are going to see the layers. What are the layers present in the anterior abdominal wall? So in this, the first layer is the skin, and this is the skin. The first layer is the skin, and next layer is the superficial fascia. This superficial fascia is having two layers. One is the outermost layer and another one is the deeper layer. So the outermost layer is the fatty layer, and deeper layer is called as membranous layer. So this outermost layer, that is fatty layer, is called as Camper's fascia, and the deeper layer is called as Carpus fascia. So again we will see the first layer is the skin, and below the skin you will find the superficial fascia. This superficial fascia is having two layers. One is the outermost layer, which is fatty layer, and it is called as Camper's fascia, and the deeper layer is called as membranous layer, and the fascia is called as Carpus fascia. And below this superficial fascia you will find the muscular layers. So in this muscular layers, the first layer is the external oblique muscle, and below this external oblique muscle you will find the internal oblique muscle, and below this internal oblique muscle you will find the transverse abdominis muscle. Okay, so skin and superficial fascia, and then you will find the muscular layers. Below this muscular layer you will find another facial layer called as transversalis fascia. Below this transversalis fascia you will find the extraperitoneal fascia, and below this extraperitoneal fascia you will find the parietal peritoneum. So this is the outermost layer of the peritoneum. So this peritoneum is a serous layer which covers the abdominal organs. So these are all the layers of the abdominal wall. So in that, now we are going to see the first layer of the abdominal wall is skin. Yes, we'll move on to skin now. Yes, here the skin of the anterior abdominal wall is capable of undergoing enormous stretching. So such kind of stretching we can see in pregnancy, or with some accumulation of fat, that is called as in conditions like obesity, or there may be an accumulation of fluid in the skin called as ascites. and also some large intra-abdominal tumors which all causes the enormous stretching of the skin. Okay, so this undue stretching may result in the formation of whitish streaks in the skin of the lower part of the anterior abdominal wall. So normally we can call it as the stretch marks. So these are commonly known as lineae albicans. These are called as lineae albicans. Okay, so this is about the skin of the anterior abdominal wall. On the skin we can find some landmarks here. So the first one is the linea alba. This linea alba is a vertical groove which is present in the median plane, anterior median plane, which divides this anterior abdominal wall into right and left halves. Okay. And from few centimeters from this linea alba, you can find another curved vertical grooves which is extending from the tip of the ninth costal cartilage to the pubic tubercle. So this is called as linea semilunaris. This linea semilunaris corresponds to the lateral margin of the rectus abdominis muscle. So this corresponds to the lateral margins of the rectus abdominis muscle. So, and also we can find some other landmark, that is the tendinous insertions of this rectus abdominis muscle also we can see here. These are the tendinous insertions. So what are the things we can see here? We can see here is the vertical groove, that is the linea alba and linea semilunaris, and this tendinous incisions, and also we can find some costal margins also here. So this becomes the costal margins. Okay. So these are the findings on the skin, and also the another important structure which is having some anatomical importance for that structure, and it is like a scar-like structure. That structure is called as umbilicus. So what is that? Umbilicus. So the umbilicus is the normal scar in the anterior abdominal wall formed by the remnants of the root of the umbilical cord. So after birth, after removal of this umbilical cord, you can find a scar-like structure. That scar is called as umbilical cord. It is also called as navel. What is that? Navel. So now what is the position? What is the exact position of this umbilicus? This umbilicus position is normally variable, but in healthy adults it lies in the anterior median line at the level of the third and fourth lumbar vertebral disc. So it is present at the level of the disc which is present between the L3 and L4 vertebrae. So this umbilicus normally lies lower in infants and also in the persons with pendulous abdomen. That means large abdomens which are moving like that. So they are called as pendulous abdomen. So in those persons also this umbilicus is placed somewhat lower to the normal level. Okay. So now we will see some of the anatomical importance of this umbilicus. This umbilicus acts as a watershed with reference to the lymphatic and venous drainage. That means it forms plane of the umbilicus. So that means above this umbilicus, the flow of lymph and venous blood is varied with the flow of lymph and venous blood below this plane of umbilicus. So that thing now we are going to see how the flow can be seen here. So this is the normal flow in this pic A. There is a normal flow of venous and lymphatic drainage above the plane of the umbilicus. So this umbilicus forms as watershed. The level of umbilicus forms as watershed. Above this level of umbilicus, the flow is upwards. The lymph and venous flow is upwards, whereas the flow below this umbilicus is downwards. So this is the normal flow of venous drainage and the lymphatic drainage seen here. Okay. And the skin around the umbilicus is supplied by the T10 segment of the spinal cord. And this umbilicus is one of the important site at which all the tributaries of the portal vein, so which drains blood from the liver, that is the portal vein, anastomose with the systemic veins, commonly called as portocaval anastomosis, which is taking place at the umbilicus. Okay. In the case of portal hypertension, these anastomoses open up to form dilated vessels. Here you can see this dilated vessel, veins radiating from the umbilicus. So you can see around the umbilicus, the veins are enlarged. So such condition is called as caput medusae. So normally caput medusae is a person. Caput means head. This person is having over the head, the person is having some venomous snakes instead of hair. That one also we can see here. So that this is called as caput medusae. Here this is the face of that person. On the head, the person is not having hair, but that person is having some venomous snakes around his head. So if you compare with this picture here, so this is the umbilicus, this is the face of that. So, and here you can find out the veins dilating around this umbilicus. So because it resembles the same as like this person, so it is named as caput medusae. Okay, I'll go back for this umbilical cord again. So this condition is called as caput medusae. However, the blood flow in the dilated veins is normal and does not break the barrier of the watershed line. That means the veins only dilated, but the flow of blood is same. So if you can see above the level of umbilicus, the flow is normally it is moving upwards only. Below this you can find the flow of blood is on the downward direction. So another condition that is called as superior vena cava obstruction. Next one is we can call it as superior vena cava obstruction. In this condition, the flow of watershed is break here, and here also you can find. So in these two conditions, this direction of flow varies here. Okay, So this is the C1 is the superior vena cava obstruction. In the superior vena cava obstruction, the entire flow of venous and the lymphatic drainage is towards the downward direction, whereas in the case of inferior vena cava obstruction, the flow of lymphatic and venous drainage is moving upwards. Okay, so these are all the variations we can see here, and also this umbilicus is having some embryological importance. One is the thing is the umbilicus is the meeting point of the four folds of the embryonic plate. One is two lateral, head and tail. So all these four folds meeting at the embryonic folds of the embryonic plate meets at the umbilicus, and this is also the meeting point of three systems. One is the digestive system, excretory system and the vascular system. All three systems are also meeting at the umbilicus point in the embryonic stage. So the digestive system is having a duct called as vitellointestinal duct. Excretory is called as urachus, and the vascular is called as umbilical vessels. All these three are getting meeting at this point. Okay, so these are the embryological importance here. If you see the clinical anatomy of this thing, here you can find the clinical anatomy. Normally all these three ducts has to close after birth, but still some connections are present after birth also, leading to some deformities after birth. So one is the remnants of the vitellointestinal duct, that means the digestive tract, okay, may form a tumor at the umbilicus. So on the umbilicus you can find some tumor like structure that is called raspberry red tumor or cherry red tumor, and also persistence of the patent vitellointestinal duct results in fecal fistula. Patent means here opening. So here there is some opening of this vitellointestinal duct. So this is the gut. Gut is nothing but here the digestive system. So there is a connection between this digestive system, normally small intestine or it may be a large intestine. A fistula is present, a connection is present from the umbilicus to this gut. Such condition is called as fecal fistula. And also another condition is called as Meckel's diverticulum. So here this is the persistence of proximal part of vitellointestinal duct. Normally it is attached to the small intestine. Okay. And also persistence of the urachus. Urachus normally means we have which is related to the excretory system. Normally the urachus means a tube-like structure. Patent means open. So a structure, a tube-like structure which opens to the umbilicus as well as the urinary bladder. So such kind of connection is an abnormal connection after birth, which is rarely seen after birth. Such condition is called as patent urachus. So and also some other condition called as umbilical hernia is seen if any weakness is present at the umbilicus. So this is about the clinical anatomy of the umbilicus. In the next session, we are going to see the superficial fascia. Thank you.